Greetings sailors and welcome to one of my own replays, and I've picked this one out mainly because it's a fairly good game and I've been having an absolutely terrible time in Warships over the last couple of days. Now these kind of streaks can happen because of course with the matchmaking in Warships, as in tanks, you never know what teammates you're going to get. And I've basically been playing solo recently. I haven't been playing in divisions a lot, and it's mostly because the people I regularly play in divisions with don't seem to have been online when I've been online and playing, so I've just been playing on my own. And over the last 4 days, since Saturday basically, I have had around about a 30% win rate. So it's one of those streaks, and I've had this kind of thing happen before where it's bad enough that it knocks off a fairly significant percentage of my global win rate. I think last time it happened it was something like 0.7%, and it's not quite as bad this time, but it's still about 0.5%. So yeah, I don't know, it's just been bad enough that I've started to doubt my own ability to play Warships, because no matter what I do, no matter what I try, it almost inevitably results in horrible losses. And you saw a bit of that in the Belfast video where I had a game with 140k plus damage, top tier, and 1500 base XP on a defeat, and it still wasn't enough. So I've gone back to a game. This is a slightly older game where I am in a division and where I do rather considerably better than I've been doing the last couple of days, because it does get disheartening when these streaks happen. And I guess this is as much to remind myself that I do somewhat know how to play Warships, even if the last couple of days are making me doubt that slightly. So this is the good old Murmansk. This is a 5.9 game. And it's one where the minimap mod looked a little bit different, if you're wondering why there are these weird coloured circles around ships that are highlighted. This is top tier, and there is a carrier, but the Murmansk's AA isn't too bad, and it's a tier 4 carrier, so it shouldn't be too much of a worry. It's also one of those times, and it's always a risk when you play tier 4, tier 5, that you'll meet one of those professional low-tier carrier seal clubbers, and they do exist. I have met them, and it's especially problematic when you're in your tier 4 or tier 5 battleship and you meet this person that is clearly not a newbie in their tier 4 or tier 5 carrier. And in the most extreme example I have in my memory is of meeting somebody who was playing a Bogue. And I think this was while I was grinding through the Kaiser. I'm now on the König with the German battleships. And just looking at how he was playing and the fact that he was just literally murdering everybody. And the fact that, well, just what he was saying in the chat as well. This was no newbie. This was no new player. And so I looked up his stats after the battle. 3,500 battles played. 3,100 of them were in the Ho show. So this was not somebody that really enjoyed a challenge in their game. This is just somebody that liked to do low tier seal clubbing over and over and over and over. But I guess, you know, if you want to play the game that way, you can. Nobody's stopping you, but it's not really a challenge at that point, is it, if you're just picking on all the new players? Anyway, so this is not going that well. Our carrier decided to park behind that little island in the middle, and he's now going to run afoul of an especially bold Izyaslav who just decided to run through the middle, and is now going to torpedo him to the face. Now I'm going to be able to kill this Izyaslav. I've turned back because I've seen that, I mean, Solomon Islands is not big, so I can see that we're going to have problems with the cap circle very shortly from the north. But it was just in time to see this Izyaslav, and yeah, I should get the kill any moment now, but as you can see our carrier's just done, so yeah, it's not been quite fast enough. Now I like the Murmansk, even with newer ships coming along like the Belfast. The Murmansk is still fun. it's still fun. It probably suffers a bit more with the matchmaking than it used to, because of course the changes to the lower tier matchmaking mean that tier 5s now much more often get into tier 7 battles. But for the Murmansk, that affects it a little bit less than, say, the Omaha and the Marblehead. And one of the best things about the Murmansk is the fact that it has a really OP rudder shift time. It's something like 3.5 seconds, which is... I'm just going by memory here, but I think that's basically half what the Omaha has. It's pretty OP. There are destroyers that wish they had rudder responses like that. So there are other nice features about it as well, but that is the one stat that really does kind of stand out about the Omaha. So I know there is a kamikaze pretty close by. I know there's also a Wyoming behind this guy, and there's the kamikaze. So I've got multiple ships to deal with here, and the kamikaze is the immediate threat. I do, however, have Hydro available, so I'm going to pop that out. The kamikaze pops up very close, which is a bit dangerous for me, but it's also a bit dangerous for him, because I've got a very good rate of fire with this this suite of 6-inch guns that I have. So with the Hydro, I spot these torpedoes easily, and I'm able to dodge those. That's not particularly a problem. I was approaching him in such a way that I was able to not expose broadsides for too long, because if you're making hard turns and exposing your side, then that's when it gets particularly tricky. So fortunately, I'm not the only one that's come back. Klingensberg, who was in, I think, the Königsberg, an Isakaze, and there's also a Kuma that's coming back towards the middle as well. They've all turned around to help defend the cap, and so it's not just me facing all these ships alone, which is quite handy because it's not like the Murmansk has a lot of armor. So AP shells for the Karlsruhe, and got a couple of citadels out of that, which was rather nice. You definitely shouldn't neglect your AP shells in any of these 6-inch gun cruisers. Even when facing battleships, potentially the AP shells can have a use, but of course the HE shells give the chance of starting fires, and if you can set multiple fires, that stacks up very, very quickly. So that's why HE shells tend to be the shell of choice. It's just sometimes AP shells can be useful as well. So this is where that rudder shift is going to come in, super useful. I don't think the turning radius is... like, it's pretty good, but it's pretty good on the Omaha anyway, I seem to remember. But it's that ability to just instantly respond that really helps the survivability of the Murmansk. And even with some of the other newer cruisers and premium cruisers in the game, I think the Murmansk is still... at the mid-tiers, one of the better ones. It has survived thus far the power creep very well, but that's because it was a very strong ship to begin with. Strong enough that the regular Omaha actually got buffed to be the same as the Murmansk. That was a bit of a point of contention for some people earlier in the life of the game, when the Murmansk came out and people looked at it and compared the stats to the Omaha and realised the Omaha wasn't as good as the premium version of the ship, which just made not a lot of sense. Anyway, some pens there, but nothing too catastrophic. I've got torpedoes out. Unfortunately, they are going to miss. I don't think I landed a single torpedo hit in this particular game, but I do have some fires going on this guy, so we've got some ticking fire damage. Now, I really should have been aiming at different sections of the ship to try and set fires on the different sections instead of just firing at the same bit over and over again. And instead, I'm trying to make another torpedo drop, but there's not much point. So that wasn't aimed at me, that was aimed at Klingensberg, and unfortunately it deleted him, which is rather... yeah, that's not good. It's not good. He had quite a lot of health left as well, so he just got completely obliterated. So we've dealt with that threat, we've dealt with all these ships that were coming round. However, of the two remaining battleships that were pressing round the south side of the South Island, only one is alive, and he's not looking too healthy, because the carrier's been going after him, and also he's got an Omaha going after him. Now, in principle, it shouldn't be that difficult to kill an Omaha, or a Murmansk for that matter, but they're quite skinny ships. You get lots of overpens when you're shooting at these. Unless you manage to get the Citadel, it's entirely possible in a battleship, especially a low-tier battleship where they're not particularly accurate, to put out a lot of shots and maybe get multiple hits, but only get a couple of thousand damage a go. And of course, with the rate of fire on a battleship being rather low, it is entirely possible in that span, the half a minute or so while you're reloading, for the enemy cruiser to land a lot of hits and set lots of fires. So unless you can do a lot of damage quickly, it can tend to not go well. And it hasn't for that Wyoming. He actually went down to the carrier. So I've left in this little bit here where it's just so you could see the chat, basically. It was one of those occasions where I was actually suggesting things to the team in the chat, and it actually was being paid attention to. So everybody that's remaining, myself, this Akaza and the Kuma, are all sticking together. And we know the enemy Wyoming is reasonably low health. Our Wyoming, at least, he died, but he took the Omaha with him. So that was useful. We don't have to deal with a faster ship. It is now just this Wyoming, who really can't run away that quickly. We also, of course, still have that Langley, but because it's just a Langley, because it's tier 4, I'm not that worried. The Kuma and the Isakaze might have to be a little bit more worried because they don't exactly have fantastic AA, but the Murmansk is one of the better cruisers for AA at tier 5. Not a lot of the tier 5 cruisers do have AA, and I'm struggling to remember if any of them even get defensive AA. I think that's from tier 6 upwards. So even in a tier 5 cruiser facing seal clubbing carriers at tier 4 and tier 5, you can still have big issues just because there's no defensive AA available. I think is it the Yubari? Or the Iwaki Alpha? There's one of those that has defensive AA. That's just occurred to me. Yeah, I think that's the only one. And otherwise, there isn't anything else that has defensive AA. It's once you get to ships like the Cleveland and the the Cleveland's the one that stands out. But I think the Alba's AA isn't completely awful. It might be. I don't know. And the new British cruisers don't have terrible AA either, but they don't get defensive AA. So I don't know why I brought them into it, but anyway. So yeah, we just have to dodge this guy's shells. This Wyoming is in a really unenviable position. It's myself, the Kuma, and this Akaze all just firing at him. He can only get out shots like twice a minute, more or less. So he doesn't stand a lot of chance. If we were at closer ranges, he'd have a better chance of nuking us cruisers, but he'd still have torpedoes to deal with, because of course all three of us remaining ships have got torpedoes. So we had pretty much won at this point. This Wyoming was basically doomed. So there's the Langley, who is not on a lot of health. Clearly something else has been shooting at him. And that's my last couple of shots, and I am actually going to get the kill, but yeah, we cut off just before that point because recording Warships replays is a bit finicky. Sometimes it loses the last second or two of footage. So that was a high caliber and a Confederate, 105,000 damage done, and 1,800 base XP. If I'd gotten the Wyoming kill, that could have been a Kraken as well. And honestly, it felt like a bit of a carry, but it was incredibly good matchmaking for that kind of result, especially in a Murmansk. In a tier 7 game, it would have been altogether a bit trickier, and you are, as I said, a bit more likely to get tier 7 games in ships like the Murmansk these days. So that was the negative side of that matchmaking change. Even though in principle it's better for the lower tiers, it's a bit harsher for the mid-tiers, and some of those mid-tier ships have coped less well than others. So that was a very healthy 300,000 credit profit there. It's actually, like, in World of Tanks, it is inevitably true that the tier 8 premiums make better credits than anything lower tier. But in Warships, that doesn't seem to quite hold true. I've found that like I think the really high credit games, when you're making 500,000 credits or more, you need a tier 8 ship for that. But the more average credit games, where it's kind of like 250,000 to 300,000 credits, just where you're playing decently, that's entirely possible with the tier 5 premiums. So unlike World of Warships, unlike World of Tanks rather, where you could definitively say tier 8s always make more money, I think the tier 5s and the tier 6 premiums are a better value proposition in Warships, because you're paying less, but you're not exactly making hugely less credits out of them, especially not if you're using things like flags. So there we go, the Murmansk, and a little reminder to myself that I don't always play horribly or get saddled with horrible teams. Occasionally I do play well, and yeah, I don't know, it feels like after the last couple of days that I've forgotten everything I know about playing Warships, because no matter what I try, it invariably goes horribly wrong. And I don't know. Hopefully I'll get out of it soon, because it does diminish your enjoyment of the game when these kind of slumps happen. So hopefully you have enjoyed this replay, and if you have, you can hit the like button, you can leave any comments below, you can sub to my channel if you haven't already, and as always, stay tuned for more.